All right, welcome back once again, everybody. I'm Don Seifrit. It's the Dr. Treefruit and Don podcast. It is Thursday, August 13th, 2026. I'm here with Dr. Kari Peter. Say hi, Kari.
Hi there.
Dr. Greg Krawczyk. Say hi, Greg.
Hello, everyone.
And the man who will be starting us off today, Dr. Shan Kumar. Say hi, Sean.
Hello, everyone.
And since you are up first, I'll let you just get rolling right into it.
Yeah. Thanks, Don. Yeah, we are right in the thick of harvests. And I just wanted to give you an update about how things are shaping up as we get to harvest them. And so we started Don, Daniel, and I started our ripening maturity updates about 2 weeks ago. And so we started with Wildfire Gala and Premier Honeycrisp, and we are mostly done with harvesting both those varieties. With Premiers, if you have not yet harvested, you should be harvesting them. They are overripe according to our test that we did this Monday, where they were at a starch of 6.6 out of 8. And so now we are slowly moving into Gala harvest season. And so the Buckeye Gala that we harvested on Monday this week came in at a starch of about 2.7 in Adams County. And so that is right about the time that you would start thinking about harvesting. I know a few other orchards said that they were still at 1. And so this is when you start to think about harvesting. You don't want your galas to Buckeye Gala, especially to go much beyond a starch index of 3, especially if you're looking at any type of long-term storage with your galas, because you run into the issue of storage disorders happening, internal browning, and other issues that happens with long-term storage of Buckeye Gala if you don't harvest it early enough. And so ideally you want to harvest it at a starch of 3. So this is a time to keep checking because things can change quite quickly. And I did want to mention that if your galas are at 60% color, for example, and they are at a starch of 2 to 3, then it's better to harvest them at that point rather than wait for the color to improve to greater than 70%, for example, and have the starch move ahead of what you want to harvest it at because of the fact that they have issues with long-term storage like internal browning. And so it's important for especially galas and honeycrisp that they be harvested at the right time that they're supposed to. For galas, that is mostly we're looking at a starch index of 3. And so it was interesting to note that we had a very rainy week last week, as all of you know. We had 2.77 inches according to the FREC weather station, and some people had closer to 3 inches, 3.5 inches of rain. So it was interesting to note that the Gala from last week to this week, even with all the rain, it has moved a little bit in size, but not so much as compared to the Honeycrisp. The Honeycrisp really pushed this past week, so it was interesting to see that varietal difference in terms of size increase because of the rain, and the Gala still seemed to hold its own. It still seems to maintain its firmness. Its firmness is quite high at 25 pounds. Would have reduced a little bit by now because it's been 4 days since we did the testing. And the Honeycrisp has greatly increased in size, and you would have noticed that if you had left your premieres without harvesting and with all the rain, you would have definitely seen cracking in some of the premieres, which is why last week we were recommending that you finish harvesting last week itself. And so, especially Honeycrisp and Honeycrisp related strains, you have a risk when you run into them getting close to being ripe that they can split with this excessive rain. And so that is something to keep in mind. And galas do that as well when as and when they get riper. So it's important to keep that in mind and look at the weather ahead when you're planning on harvesting. And the Honeycrisp in Adams County again is at a starch index of 2.2, good size. And so we still have about week and a half maybe for Honeycrisp to be serious about Honeycrisp harvests. And so I think Gala is right now you're harvesting, and then you'll move into Honeycrisp shortly, sometime in the next week or two, depending on how the weather is going. And so with Berks, based on the data that Dawn collected, we are still at a starch index of 1 as of Monday this week for both Gala and Honeycrisp. So it seems like They are a little bit behind. Maybe keep tracking it and then see if maybe they move sometime next week or later next week. I think might be a good time to harvest the Gala, and then following that in a few weeks the Honeycrisp as well. So in general, they seem to be a little behind on the starch index as compared to Adams County. And overall, we're seeing that the Gala had 12 bricks. Or Buckeye Gala had about 11 bricks that we checked in Adams County, so we're still waiting a little bit on the bricks, and its firmness held strong still, and for both the Gala and the Honeycrisp, so that's good. And so we're still waiting for maybe a little bit of sugar, a little bit movement on the starch index before you start a serious harvest of Gala followed by Honeycrisp. So, the other thing I wanted to mention was this year we have sort of a moderate color development here. It's not, I don't think it's as good as what we had last year, but it's also not as bad as what we had a few years ago. Just a general disclaimer that waiting for color development in order to harvest your crop is, especially if you're storing it for longer periods of time, it is a losing game, meaning that you want to try to do what you can to improve color, but not wait for color to develop before you harvest, because the later you wait to harvest, you're compromising on your storage life. Now, moving track from harvest, this is also the time, if you have not already, to take samples for soil and leaf testing. Uh, we have terminal growth in most of our varieties, and I mean we are done with the season, and so in blocks we've had close to a full crop load and you want to boost nitrogen a bit, you can do a post-harvest spray 2 to 3 weeks after harvest of about 3 to 5% urea, which would be good for the tree. So you can do that. Take your soil test, take your leaf test samples, and then for especially for varieties that have a low threshold for mistakes like Honeycrisp, you want to be doing that leaf testing at least once every other year or in rotation every 2 or 3 years in order to get accurate data on what your nitrogen potassium levels are. So as in relation to calcium, is you want to maintain a much higher ratio of nitrogen and potassium to calcium. And so doing a leaf test will give you the most accurate data for that. And just a quick revision on taking samples. Some of you have reps coming in and taking those samples for you. Some of you take those samples yourself. So usually you're looking at sampling leaves from new growth. And so from the new growth that we had this year, go to the middle of that and take about 5 leaves from that middle region of the new growth. 5 leaves from 10 trees or 10 leaves from 5 trees spread out around the orchard to get a good sample for your leaf analysis. And yep, and you can send that to the Ag Analytical Laboratory at Penn State, or you can send that to a lab that is close by where you are. It's important to note that we have provided updated recommendations specifically for Honeycrisp, both on the soil and the leaf test. And these updates have been made to the Ag Analytical Laboratory system as well. So if you're working with another provider of soil and leaf testing, please do let them know to change their recommendations, especially for Honeycrisp, both the soil and leaf test, so that they are updated. All these updates are also provided in the Penn State Tree Fruit Guide, but you can also look at the Penn State Ag Analytical Laboratory website as well to get some information about that. But I would say that would be it for me. Happy harvesting.
Awesome. Thanks, Sean. That was a good update.
Thank you.
Dr. Peter, you're up next.
Okay, so two things I want to talk about. The first, I just want to mention an updated criteria for the tree assistance program that the Farm Service Agency has. I've written about this, I've talked about this. This tree assistance program, or TAP for short, is for folks who lose trees, bushes, or vines, so perennial crops, due to some natural disaster, disease that is beyond the grower's control and in excess of normal mortality. So one thing to note is that before you had to reach this 15% tree loss in a site. They've removed that. So no longer do you need to meet a certain percent criteria of loss. Now it's just in excess of normal mortality. Also note that for this particular calendar year, there are deadlines that you have to adhere to. It's usually typically within, I'm trying to remember as far as, oh gosh, I just forwarded this out to YGA and I'm already forgetting it. I remembered one part of it as far as it's the 15% tree loss was removed. Okay. As far as when it's when you have to submit this, the claim deadline for 2026 losses, producers who did not meet the 15 loss requirement are now eligible, must submit an application for payment but no later than October 7th, 2026, or 90 days from the date of the disaster event or when the loss is apparent. So this is just something for you to be aware of the deadline date. In many of these cases, FSA may request you to have a letter from a quote unquote expert to justify your claim that this was beyond your control and there was nothing you can do. I am that person who can write that letter. I've written letters for numerous growers. I'm writing one right now for a grower. But basically, it's just stating that this was an issue that was beyond your control and that there was nothing that you could have done to mitigate it. So that's about it. But so just take note of that, especially for folks who really struggled with fire blight this year. This was a really tough year for fire blight, so this is something you could take advantage of. The other thing I want to mention is a gentle reminder about your last sprays before harvest and to not stretch your pre-harvest sprays too much. In light of the weather we've had recently, it's been very rainy the last couple weeks. I know it's been feast or famine with the amount of rainfall that has fallen. Some people have had like an inch, other people have had 9 inches. But regardless, we're getting frequent rain events, frequent wetting events. So there is a high probability that whatever fungicide that you may have sprayed 2 weeks ago has been washed off if you haven't put anything on your trees since. Fruit can be especially vulnerable during this time because it is still quite warm out there. It's pretty humid. We are getting these pop-up thunderstorms because of how warm it is. So this is something you need to be mindful of these last sprays for a couple reasons. One, fruit rots, number one. Many fruit rots have a latent period, so you do not see that rot at the time of harvest. You only know it's there when you take your fruit out of storage after a period of time. We do know through our research that pretty much rot spores are around all season long, and all they need are the right environmental conditions for that infection to occur. And we do see those right environmental conditions right now around harvest. The other issue is storage scab. So we think of apple scab is an early season disease, but if it wasn't controlled too well early in the season, or that maybe some breakthrough disease in the orchard that you may not be aware of, storage scab occurs when you've got really excessive wetting around harvest and the fruit go into storage, and then you see these little tiny lesions that manifest while the fruit are in storage. So you get another round of scab infection, late season scab infection, as a result of these late season wetting events. And it's most problematic during periods where we have excessive wetting during the harvest time and during this time of year when fungicides are getting washed off or fungicides are not being reapplied in time. So there's incentive to make sure you have good fungicides on your fruit before harvest. Your packers will appreciate you, especially since this is a tricky year with the amount of fruit that we have available. So we really want things to be in the best possible shape, and you growers or packers will be very appreciative of this. So what can you use? Well, the 4 big ones that I always advocate, we have a 4th one, I should say, that I always advocate. Maravon, Luna Sensation. Maravon in particular has a post-harvest disease control where it controls blue mold and gray mold, and I'll touch on blue mold in a minute. Luna Sensation, similar frac groups of Maravon. It's still a good product. Flynn Extra is just frac 11. Excellent. And then now you have Cabrio, which is FRAC 11. That's the Paraclostrobin, that's a Maravon. So you have four good FRAC 11 fungicides that will help keep things in check, especially if you do not want to have Captan as one of your last sprays. For organic options, options are limited, especially if you're thinking about long-term storage. Sulfur, I know this isn't people's favorites, but this is something that that is still works. You have OSO, you've got the biologicals like Serenade and Double Nickel. I'm looking at other products, like as far as softer products that are available out there that I haven't excessively tested yet, but we're doing it this year, so we'll see how they fare. So there could be, I can add to this list of softer options for folks. So this won't be so problematic if your fruit aren't going to be stored for a really long period of time. But if they're going to be pushed and sold very quickly after harvest, there's probably not much you have to worry about because major post-harvest issues like fruit rots and storage scab typically occur when fruit are in storage for like 2 to 3 months or more. So as far as circling back to blue mold, another incentive to make sure you have things tightened up on the fungicide front at harvest or close to near harvest is the issue with blue mold. Pretty much every pack house out there has blue mold in it. It is a fact of life. It's very difficult to completely sterilize the environment and get rid of blue mold spores in your cold storages and pack house facilities. The problem with blue mold is that it needs a natural opening, like a wound, or let's say possibly a rot, to enter and cause infection. And when you get infection, that blue mold infection is going to produce a mycotoxin called patulin, which is regulated. Um, there's tight thresholds that processors must adhere to before making that apple lot into a processed apple product. So I've seen this happen in the past of bins being rejected due to excessive, exceeding the threshold, the patulin level threshold. This is occurring in your pack house, in your cold room. And so you want to do everything in your power to limit that infection. And using a pre-harvest spray like Maravon or Luna Sensation, that is one step in the battle because those are, especially Maravon is specifically labeled for blue mold control. And I suspect Luna Sensation, Flynn Extra, Cabrio are going to have the same level of control to fight off blue mold. For packers that may want to use a specific post-harvest fungicide, you've got four: Scholar, Pembotech, Academy, and Murtec. I'd caution against Murtec because there's already high resistance to Murtec of the penicillium population out there. It's just the nature of FRAC group 1. So if you do use Murtec, make sure you possibly mix it with another product. And so as far as other tidbits to remember during the harvest season and as you're harvesting to sort of limit issues, number one, if you encounter fruit rots in the orchards, and this would be, I'd say, problematic for Honeycrisp because it's so susceptible to bitter rot, drop the fruit to the ground to get it out of the tree so you limit basically the spore dispersal within the tree. Remember, the more mature the fruit, the more susceptible it is to storage diseases. Bruised or wounded fruit are going to be susceptible as well, so be mindful of how you are harvesting. As a reminder of your bins themselves, soil and plant debris can carry in pathogens into the pack house, so make sure that your bins are free of that, especially on the outside of it and on the inside of it for sure. Warm temperatures are going to encourage pathogens to grow. So when you are harvesting, if there is a way to keep your fruit cool or decrease the temperature a bit, so keeping your bins in the shade, if that's possible, that's something else to think about as far as limiting fruit rots. And also, what's in your control is how long your bins go from the orchard to the pack house. So if you can minimize that time. I know once it's at the pack house, it's out of your hands, but at least what's within your control is that delivery, making that delivery as timely as possible. So those are the broad brushstrokes of the nuggets of wisdom I want people to be thinking about as they are harvesting or nearing harvest for certain apple varieties. Really all apple varieties for that matter. But I know we're at various stages of harvest.
Okay, good update, Kari. Thanks for the talk about everything, and especially some of the blue mold talk with the Packers.
Yeah,
Um,
this is I need to just to emphasize it again. When this has happened in the last couple years, people say this is the first time they're hearing it, and I've been talking about this since I started. So I will keep saying it and keep reminding you until I'm blue in the face. No pun intended there.
yeah, I'm pretty sure we highlighted this last year.
Yep,
Probably
we
the year
highlight it
before.
every year, highlighted in the winter. Yeah.
So
It'll stick eventually.
yeah, fingers crossed. All right, and last but not least, Greg.
Okay, well, I keep thinking that this is a not normal year, at least from the fruit availability perspective for the insects. Uh, One thing to, and we talked about it earlier, but one thing to remember is at this time, what we really worry about is, well, we really want to have fruit that are as free from blemishes as possible. And that actually includes having no larvae, no worms inside the fruit. And I know that it's difficult to guarantee something like this, especially in situation when a lot of us are experiencing less than normal crop. Some of us have no crop. Some of us have a very, very limited crop that we still hope to sell, that we still hope to be marketable, have a marketable value. Codling moth and oriental fruit moth. Those are the worms that actually you can see at harvest if you did not manage them during the season. Codling moth is different than oriental fruit moth in a way that codling moth can develop only in fruit. There is really no alternative feeding site where codling moth can survive. So knowing this and understanding that we are right now at the end of the second generation flight of codling moth, basically starting the third generation flight. And again, this varies from location to location. Some people might still be in the second generation. Third may or may not show up in some location. If they are fruit and the number of fruit is limited in the orchard, you have to understand that codling moth will find the fruit that are still there and deposit the egg on the fruit. They will not deposit eggs somewhere else. What it means is that if you know that you have a codling moth population in the orchard, and you know that you have fruit in the orchard, and you know you want to harvest, those fruit right now needs to be covered with the active residue, preventing larval feeding from now until basically for the codling moth, at least until mid to late September. For oriental fruit moth, until mid to late October. And again, a lot of this, what you need to do right now depends what you see that you have in the orchard. Assuming you had traps and you monitor codling moth and oriental fruit moth, you know right now if you need or you don't need to have this active residue present all the time. Before we go, what can we use to provide this active residue? I want to talk a little bit about oriental fruit moth. Oriental fruit moth, in contrast to codling moth, actually can survive on growing shoots. They do great on fruit, and we're talking both stone and palm fruit. But if the fruit are not present or the number of fruit is lower and so on, oriental fruit moth will do pretty well still in feeding inside the growing terminals. Oriental fruit moth also flies much longer than codling moth. Much longer means that when codling moth is done by mid-September, late September, it used to be early September to mid-September, but now we have seen codling moth even in October. Oriental fruit moth will basically be active and mate and lay eggs on fruit until basically end of October. And again, we don't know the weather, and this is a big X factor here. But if the weather is right, oriental fruit moth can lay eggs and the larva can enter the fruit basically until end of October. Codling moth only until mid to end of September. So what to do about it? Well, there's no new magic insecticide that can be used. We have basically insecticides from 3 different groups. We have spinosins, which is delegate. And then we have diamides, which is Altacor, Exirel, Verdepren. Any one of those 4 products provides at least 14, sometimes even 21 days residual activity. So remember about it when you decide when you're gonna spray the last time. When something that will be harvested by end of September, maybe spraying at first week of September will be good enough application. Something that will be harvested in October might need to have a longer residual product or longer residual activity. Again, delegate, Altacor, Exirel, Verdeprim, all of them will help you at least for 2 weeks, in many cases for 21 days. So it's gonna work. And you don't have to spray and worry about spraying, the day before the harvest because they might be there. That's not the case. If you are organic or trying to stay organic, your only option is something that have codling moth granulosis virus. Those are the products like Sidex, Madex, or Virosoft. With those products, the residual activity on the fruit will not last longer than 7 days. And it's not that you can use higher rate and the activity residual will be stronger. Basically, within 7 days, those products are being basically disarmed by UV light. So rate doesn't make any difference. Within 7 days, they will not work. Saying this, they also have a much shorter PHIs, but this is something that can be used also in conventional orchard. If you're gonna harvest, you're running out of the PHI timing, using any one of those viruses can also work and will help. The situation is quite different with another pest that also becoming a problem at this time. I'm talking about brown marmorated stingbug. And I know some of you will say, hey, I don't have any stingbug. I did not see them. They are not there. Well, this is the time right now that they are starting moving from surrounding vegetation to orchards. They're basically looking for the best food source, And orchards are generally much higher nutritional value for the stink bug trying to prepare to overwinter than any ornamental trees in the forest or woods. Again, it's an old melody, but put the traps out so you don't have to try to find them on the tree, but you just check trap and you know that they are there, or you know that they are not there. The traps that are available right now and the lures that are available right now for brown marmorated stink bug are very effective. If your trap is not showing you that brown marmorated is in the orchard, it means it's not there. If they catching adults, maybe some nymphs, it means they are there and something has to be done. Unfortunately, there is not really a soft option to control brown marmorated stink bug. Your best option with the longest residual activity is anything that includes bifenthrin, which is pyrethroids. We have a registration for two products, Bifenthrin and Brigade. Both of them have 14-day PHI, but they also have a very long residual. So if you know you need to control brown marmorated stink bug, your best options are either Bifenthrin or Brigade. You actually can use bifenthrin, the active ingredients, twice during the season. When we had a problem, a big scale problem, and we know we had a stink bugs, quite frequently what growers did was they were applying the first application in the late August and then repeat the application in the late September. Remember, there is a 14-day PHI here. So you have to pay attention what you use and when, so you don't run into the harvest issue. And Shan described, all the issues with the harvest from the horde perspective, but from the PHI on insecticides, both bifenthrin containing products have 14 days PHI. Danitol, which is another pyrethroid, which is also effective, has 7 days PHI. And Warrior, which is probably the least expensive pyrethroid, this one has a 21 days PHI. And they are also good products. If you don't want to go with the pyrethroids, and there is a good reason why not, probably some of you still remember lots of talks being given that if you use pyrethroids that late in the season, you actually are increasing the number of eggs that European red mites are depositing for the overwintering, and then you're potentially running into the mite problem. If you're gonna use neonicotinoids, Assail or Belay, your best option. You have to go with the highest rates of both highest label rates. For Assail, I think it's 8 ounces. I don't remember right now for the Belay. One thing about Belay is that Belay both of them have the 7 days PHI. But 21 days on peaches, but I think most of the peaches, if anyone had peaches, the harvest is really going down. So those are the options for the commercial orchards. And again, put the traps out so you don't have to spray because Greg said so that might need to spray. Just if you see them in the trap, you know you have a pressure. If you don't see them in the trap, you know you don't have to spray. It's that simple. Those traps are effective. If you are organic grower, your most effective products are basically natural pyrethrum, which you can have in product like Azera or Pygenic. There is also some efficacy in the product from Marron Venerate, and this will also help. but those natural, organically approved products have a very short residual. We're talking less than a week, and they will not work anymore. So this is something to remember when you decide, what you still need to spray and you don't want to spray. Again, I'm going to stress one thing, that with the lower number of fruit in the orchards, those fruit are actually exponentially more attractive to insects that are looking for the fruit. And I have been in situations that under low crop, we observed much higher percentage of fruit injured by insect. And it's not that the pressure from the insects was higher. It's simply because insects had less fruit that they use for the food or overwintering or whatever they need to. So remember about it. Another thing, and this is the last thing, that there are also leaf hoppers, and some growers I remember from the past complaining that they hate to harvest because leaf hoppers are getting everywhere and so on. If you're gonna go with neonicotinoids to control stink bug, you're gonna control leaf hoppers. If you just wanna control only leaf hoppers, you can go with the lowest label rate of neonicotinoids, and they will control leaf hoppers also. But those lowest rates will not control stink bug. Like for a sale, if you go 8 or 6 ounces, it will control stink bug. If you go below, you will control perfectly leaf hoppers, but you will not control stink bug. So that's really all I have. And again, this is something that really will stick for the rest of the season. I mean, if we have more updates like this, I probably will keep repeating this. But those are the pests that I think are the most important right now. Not fruit related, but if on peaches, someone is looking for dealing with the peach tree borer because, well, there were symptoms of injuries or something, this is the time. It's actually too early right now, but beginning of September to mid-September is a good time to spray trunk to control the larvae, the eggs, the larvae that are actually being hatched from the eggs that are deposited by adults. They will be, the later you go, the more higher percentage of the larvae you'll be able to kill. However, the later you go, some of them might go deeper into the woods, and whatever you use, and right now you're really left only with pyrethroids for this application. Either you're gonna go with Lorsban, but again, Lorsban is still legal, but not legal. It's a complicated issue. But anyway, this is the time to control them, to control borer, especially peach tree borer. If you're talking about dogwood borer, similar situation, but dogwood borer can also be controlled very nicely in the spring. So as a trunk application. So those are really all the updates I have. Any questions or comments? Done?
Had to unmute. Yeah, no, I think that was a really good update. I'll say, we've been seeing some codling moth damage in some of the places where I've been doing sampling for Shan, just because there has still been some fruit in those blocks. Even if folks have said, hey, we're not gonna wind up picking these, because, I assume because they haven't been treating those. But I think it's one of those things that you've said that, they're gonna show up, they're gonna be there. They're going to complete those life cycles.
Exactly. And again, I mean, like for codling moth, it's really, a matter of life or die. If they don't put their eggs on the fruit. And this happened already during the first generation. I mean, we see in many orchards that we're monitoring right now, the flight of the second generation codling moth was much, much, much lower than the flight of the first generation. Because during the first generation, we basically observed individuals that survived from the 2025 season. The second generation flight are only individuals that survive during the 2026. And in the
Mhm.
orchards where there are no food for them, that was the best natural control for the codling moth you have. I know that that's not what growers want to, and
No.
I don't want it, but that's the reality. If you did not have fruit at all, the codling moth next year, you might not even have a codling moth next year, unless they will fly from somewhere else. Because basically, they will not survive if there are no fruit on the tree.
There you go. All right.
Unfortunately, we can't say the same for disease.
Yeah. All right.
No comments.
Yeah, no
Sorry.
comment there. If anyone doesn't have anything else, then I will try and get this edited and folks can listen to this. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. Say goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye, everybody.
Everyone.